Well, hello. We're talking in this chapter about some new things that have happened, and one of those things that actually started back in the 1960s was the whole idea of synthesis as a form of music. And today we just take for granted that there are synths in a lot of the music we listen to without knowing what a synth actually is and what it does. We normally think of, seeing a keyboard like this, and that it you can make some cool sounds. And that these sounds can be varied. So anyway, there are just an amazing array of sounds that are possible with a synth. But what's actually happening, and how do they work? The fundamental idea happened with the technology advances, like many of the things we're talking about. So the invention of the transistor happened in 1956. Before transistors, you could do things with electronics, but it required sort of big vacuum tubes. With a transistor, you can make something very small that does the same types of operations. So, a man named Robert Moog was one of the early innovators using transistors to create musical sounds. And the basic idea is an oscillator. An oscillator is what its name sounds like. It moves something back and forth. It oscillates. In this case, it moves a voltage up and down, which can then be transferred into an output device and can be heard as sound. So here's one of the most simple oscillators that we can make. It's actually pretty amazing what it sounds like for being just a simple combination of 3 or 4 different components. This is really what made the synthesizer possible. Before that, there were tubes, and you could make some sounds with them, but they were very large, so you couldn't move them around very well. So just with a couple other little basic elements, for instance, this is a resistor, and what it does, it just acts like a little restriction valve. So it impedes voltages and currents from going through it. So you can control how much voltage is going into something with one of these. Then you have a capacitor. A capacitor is like a little balloon for electric charges. So you can sort of blow it up, and it resists current from going through until it discharges and releases energy. So you can store up a little bits of charges in these, depending on how big they are. Another sort of important thing is a diode. These are light emitting diodes, so you see them in everything now. Usually as like on-off lights for devices, but they have a lot of uses. They act like a little one-way valve, allow electricity to flow one way and not the other. So with just these 3 little pieces, you can make a basic synthesizer. So now I've taken these elements, I've put them together, soldered them so they're connected in a specific way. And you can see there's a little transistor right down there. It's sort of connected to this LED light emitting diode. There's a capacitor. This brown thing is another capacitor, and you can see one resistor hiding down there. So in this configuration, if you put an electrical voltage through these are just volume adjustments. They're called potentiometers. It just allows how much electricity is getting to the different elements. Okay, so what I've done now is I've taken those little modules that we saw last time, and I've put them together in banks of 3s, and I have 5 different banks of those. So we can combine all of these individual oscillators to make some pretty complex looking waves. And those waves sound increasingly complex. So let me bring in a low pitch here. And so you see a nice wave form starting there. And as I change the frequency of that, you can see the waveform gets bigger when it gets lower. And look how it gets closer together as I bring it to a higher frequency. So let me get back down to a really low note here. Now let's add another oscillator that's going to be a little higher, and you can see how this gets much more complex as I start adding more oscillators. And see it change immediately, and then as I sweep the pitch here, the wave gets even crazier looking. Okay, I'll just tune it to that. And so we've got 2 different oscillators going. Let's add another higher one. And we get even more complexity. And let's go even higher here. So let's see if I can get that more in frame. And even a higher one still. And so now we've got a really complicated looking wave, and this could be the start of a patch. So you could play this note from a keyboard once you can control it with a keyboard and make some really complicated sounds. So this is the basic concept of how all synths work, is using oscillators. The other part of this, which I haven't talked about, is you can add filters to make these shapes of the waves different. And that was the next step in synthesizer development. So this is the basic way that all synthesizers work, and it has become increasingly complicated over the years, and the way you can control these different waveforms and control it from a keyboard to trigger all these sounds. It makes a lot of the music that we hear today possible.